What I suggest that we do a quick round, like 2 minutes, that each of the gentlemen explain what they're doing. As I said, many of you won't know the companies. And then we take a little bit more time, and as suggested, I would like to tie the audience in as early as possible, because we're here for you to learn something, for you to ask questions, and to get an idea about the composition of the audience. Who of you represents companies actually thinking about C2C, occupying themselves with that? Who of you works for a company? You're very timid. We're not biting you or whatever. Okay, great. So that's about, I would say, a fourth. What about students and academia? Okay. And the rest is what? Interested public? So who has not been covered does not belong to a company or to students? Okay. Thanks for being here. It's especially tough to be here on a Saturday morning, so thank you very much for coming. I suggest we start with Timothy Glaz to give us an idea about what you do, 2 minutes, and then we go in depth a little later on. Yes, please. Just actually introduce your company and yourself.
Okay, Werner Mertz is a company that was founded in 1867, candlestick producing in that early days, and we then moved via shoe polish to cleaning floors, and in 1986 we actually created the first eco-friendly all-purpose cleaner, which was basically also in a time where ecological issues came up, like Chernobyl, and that made it necessary for a company like ours to actually find a solution also in a cleaning product, because basically we're a chemical company. We use chemical ingredients to make cleaning products that work, and we wanted to start changing the way we produced products in the cleaning area. And so that's when we started 30 years ago to develop new products, and the brand that we use is Frosch, which is probably well known in the room.
Great, thank you. Michel.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Tarkett is a global leading company in the flooring sector. We produce about every kind of flooring except ceramic tile. So we produce wooden parquet, laminate, linoleum, vinyl flooring, rubber sheet flooring. We are a very global company. About 1/3 of our sales are made in North America, 1/3 in Europe, and 1/3 in the rest of the world. We employ 12,000 people around the world, and we have 34 factories, and the turnover this year will be around 2.7 billion euro. And we have acquired a lot of companies in the last few years, and we are very pleased with the last acquisition we made in December last year, having Deso, a carpet manufacturer very well known in Europe, joining us, so being part of our Tarkett family. And Deso has been also very strongly involved in Cradle much before Tarkett, actually.
Yeah, we touched on that a little later on. Michael.
Yeah, so I'm a chemist by training, and I'm right now spending most of my time in the Netherlands. I'm teaching at the Erasmus University, which is the most respected public business school in Europe right now, because I need to see that it makes sense for business. Cradle to cradle makes sense for business. And it's no longer about sustainability, it's about innovation, about quality, about beauty. A product which becomes waste is just terrible quality. It's a quality problem. And so let's use this 40 years of blame and shame for innovation. And it's nice to hear Matthias Horks, but in a certain way, he sounds a little bit like if somebody jumps out of a skyscraper and says, oh, it works now for 20 floors already. So there's something in between that, yeah. So.
What I would like to know, Werner Mertz started 30 years ago with working with sustainable products. So I cannot ask the question, how did you discover Cradle to Cradle? You have a long history in doing that. Could you give us an idea why you started with those products? You were a pioneer among ecological products on the shelves in the retail stores. Just give us an idea what you have been doing in the past 30 years.
Well, of course, you start with an idea. You start with the idea that you need to improve what you were doing before in an ecological way. Of course, as already pointed out by Matthias Hawks, you start from from reducing what you have been doing before, using less chemicals, maybe using other sources, and you learn a lot once you start to change your products, because it's a very complex thing. I mean, you don't just change a recipe, you change, it still has to work at the end. So it's a pretty long process that you go through, and you learn how to change and where to look after, and you talk with your suppliers, and you develop criteria for your suppliers that they should also respect. And then you start looking into your own processes and improving, and you start with an eco-management system and so on. So you have different areas of where you can start and where you can proceed in changing your processes and your products. Where our consumer products, people go into the shops and buy our products, and they compare our products to other products in the shelf. So you have a very direct comparison also with price. So you also have to look at the economical side of sustainability, if you really look in the whole picture, because of course if we run out of business, then there's no help to that. So basically what we did was we started the process in 1986, and we understood that we are doing things right and also creating a circular economy, recycling packaging, and also using material that comes from renewable sources and so on. And obviously Cradle to Cradle fits perfectly to what we have been doing, and I think it's something that more or less gives it a good, more or less, brand. It's like a brand for what we are doing. And in such, as being a branded goods company, we of course are looking for trustworthy brands, and Cradle to Cradle, from its idea already, is very trustworthy. So that's where the connection kind of came into a fit.
But how did you get together? I mean, you were actually doing Cradle to Cradle things without knowing the name. So how did you?
Actually, a colleague of mine became aware of Cradle to Cradle, and he brought it into the company. And we are a small company, and the owner is very near, and you can just go into the office and say, hey, I just found out something that might be interesting for our company. And the owner, Mr. Schneider, said, yeah, sounds good. Let's get into what details it needs to get this the certification and what's behind Cradle to Cradle. And of course, then we took up contact to Michael Braungart and his organization, and we learned what was behind the idea.
Okay, how was that in the case of Tarkett? Because I know the story is a little different.
Well, actually, I mean, Tarkett is a Swedish name, and one of our origin is coming from Sweden. And in Sweden, I think these environmental issues have been taken very seriously long before it started to become popular. And if I take the case of Tarkett, I mean, they've been recycling vinyl flooring made of PVC back to 1957, so quite 60 years ago almost. And the company was doing somehow good things, but not in a very formal way, not understanding exactly what they had to do. And when I joined Tarkett 8 years ago, I mean, I said, well, we must organize ourselves and have a sustainable strategy, which is really part of our core strategy, which is really embedded in our core strategy. And actually, a few years, 2 years later, actually, I did meet Michael Braungart. And it's not a joke, I mean, I met him on Fool's Day, April 31st, 2010. And we met together in Charles de Gaulle Airport at 7 in the morning. That was the only slot we could find. And that was kind of a very inspiring meeting for me, a kind of tipping point, as the earlier presenter explained this morning, where really I said, well, it's not just about doing less bad is good. We need really to reinvent the way we work, change the paradigm of how the company is organized. And from that on, from 2010, we really seriously worked together with EPEA and Michael's team to address all the things that we could do to improve the business model we had. And for us, it's a journey. I mean, we're permanently looking for doing things in a different way, in a better way, and that's how we started.
But let's make it tangible. I mean, we've talked about the Frosch products, the Neutralreiniger, the Essigreiniger. I name them because usually company representatives are too shy to call the specific products, but you know them, the green stuff on the shelf. But tell us a little about, I mean, what is different about the products you have? Let's make it tangible. Why is it better? Why should I go for a Tarkett floor in my gym or in my apartment? I mean, rather than getting something else. I mean, let's talk about we all try to make better products, right? So let's share a little bit about that.
To start the journey, I mean, the first thing Michael told me, he said, well, you know, vinyl PVC is no good. You need to abandon vinyl PVC. And I said, well, I need to understand. First of all, it's 50% of our business, so I cannot get rid of 50% of my business. So please, Michael, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a chemist. Help me understand what's wrong with vinyl. And I say, okay, well, let's be concrete. So we had a very technical and scientific discussion between our team and his team, and we came up to actually two issues. One, the fact that the indoor air quality can be polluted by VOC emissions. And the second one is, what do we do at the end of not at the end of life, but at the end of the use of the product, which is really part of Cradle. How do you recycle it? So, concretely speaking, what have we done in the last few years? I mean, our R&D team have worked very thoroughly to completely reformulate our flooring and first reduce the emission of VOCs to a level which is almost undetectable nowadays, which is 10 to 100 times lower than the German norm, which is the strictest norm in Europe and in the world. So by doing so, we clearly improve the indoor air quality. And since we all spend 90% of our time indoor, I think the human health is somehow much improved. The second thing that we found out through the very detailed and technical study was the fact that in our formulation, to make the product supple, we use phthalate plasticizers. And phthalate, today there is a big debate on the impact on phthalate of human endocrine system. And since there is a debate, we said, well, I mean, some people are saying it's bad, some people are advocates saying it's good, and frankly speaking, there's no enough scientific evidence. But one thing I know for sure is if we can find some better solution, let's do it. So we embarked with BASF, to name them. We worked together developing a new plasticizer without phthalate. And we reformulated all our product lines so that 2 years ago now, all the products that we sell in Europe are phthalate-free. So again, it improves the impact on human health.
Michael, you said you have a couple of other examples of products of companies. Give us an idea about other products or other companies which are on the way. I think you also said you have some funny pictures, whatever funny pictures are. But I think please give us a somewhat broader idea besides flooring and
I have
cleaning.
some slides as well, if I could have them a little later. So first of all, I would like to tell you the whole story. So. The meeting which we had first at April 1st in 2010 was at 6 o'clock in the morning at Charles de Gaulle Airport, and we met at the Sheraton Airport and Sheraton Hotel and the lobby, and we never met before, and it was organized by the offices, and then after the meeting, Michel called his office and said, "How could you do this to me? How could I meet such an idiot? How could this happen, really?" And so they really panicked around it. And then he said, "Oh, it's April Fool's Day." So, it was really funny. I still hear the story at least 5 times a year. So, and definitely the first thing is indoor air quality, because the indoor air quality in a building is about 3 to 8 times worse than outside urban air. because nothing in a building is designed for indoor use. And asthma is by far the most relevant children's disease. Yeah. About 40% of our houses have mold, schimmel in Dutch. Yeah. So they have mold, which is makes asthma, Schimmel auf Deutsch. Yeah. So, and this is why we first need to say what is the right thing instead of optimizing wrong things. Yeah. So we need to say, so how can I have healthy air instead of sealing a building? When you now seal a building and you say to save energy, you're optimizing the wrong things, and then you make the wrong things perfect. Then they are perfectly wrong. Yeah. So with this, you need to look, this is why it's not about efficiency, but about effectiveness. To say, yeah, what is the right thing? If I need to go from Lüneburg into Hamburg, it doesn't help me to go efficiently into Hanover. Yeah, so I need to say, what is the right thing? What is the long-term perspective? And traditional sustainability makes your customer your enemy. You tell your customer, if you don't buy it, it's even better. Do you really need it? Could you wait another year? Could you minimize your footprint? This is why it's important that it's a long-term perspective that you say, look, where do you want to be in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, 2030? Now, the customer becomes your friend because you help the company to change. The more you buy, the quicker the company can change. Now, the customer becomes a change agent, and you don't need to certify things anymore. You can just define where you want to be, and you be very transparent about what you're doing. And this is about business, because this makes the business an innovation engine where we can now use all this blame and shame to the positive. Now the glass is half full, not half empty. And we can use it to really to innovate, and we can use this as a competitive advantage because we can make products which are far better. We are not competing with slave labor from Malaysia because they're just better products from the beginning. And this is why it's across the industry, it's such a friendly tsunami, because people, and it celebrates the human footprint instead of minimizing a footprint. Yeah. And a lot of things what you could hear with Matthias Horks are definitely in the cradle-to-cradle sense. But on the other side, we are running out of time, not only in this conference. The speed of destruction is much faster right now, and at a certain point, we will not have the resources to change the system, because we will just need the resources to repair the existing things. So this is why we need to have a clear plan and a clear vision how to do things. Otherwise, we are just rearranging the deck chairs, and it's not about a big disaster. It's really important to understand that it's not the end of the planet. Yes, it's exactly what Matthias Horks explained it. But what we will lose is, first, we will lose most of the people. If we continue, the planet will destroy us, but we will at least survive 2 billion people on this planet. But what we will mostly lose is we will lose our dignity, and we will lose all the species which we like most, like the elephants and the tigers and the lions and the bears and the whales. They will disappear when we continue like that. And we can. But what we can see, and where I completely agree, is to say, hey, look, the biodiversity in the city of Berlin is 3 to 4 times higher than the surrounding agricultural desert. So we can have a beneficial footprint. And when industry understands it, then people become proud. You can make innovation. One of the companies what Michel bought for Tarkett is Desso. Yeah. Desso, and we have 2 representatives, Annette and Rüdi here, for example. They came up out of cradle-to-cradle thinking, not by making a thing which is a little less bad, but about carpets which are actively cleaning the air, not about being less toxic. And because of this, now Desso is a big inspiration and innovation engine for the whole Tarkett-Group in doing this. So it's about industry celebrating the opportunity to make a difference. And what's important is not to romanticize nature. Nature is our partner, our teacher, but not our mother, because when we make nature our mother, we always feel terrible to do things and to be in industry. So it's first the mindset behind it. And so there are endless numbers of products. Mostly first it started with textiles, because in the textile industry there are at least 15 times more people working in the textile industry than they work in the car industry globally. Yeah, it's by far the most relevant industry of the world. It makes half of the world industrial wastewater problems, for example. And this is why it's textiles, then it's about building materials, because building materials cause at least half of the waste problems. And sure, when you combine textiles with building materials, yeah, you end up with carpets. Yeah, this is why it's in that middle. Definitely, this is why it's such a creative platform, because these carpets and these flooring systems, they need cleaning systems. Because if you have a great flooring system, but you don't look how to clean it, then it just doesn't help you, because then you have the smell and the off-gassing from the detergents and the cleaning stuff. So this is about forming strategic partnerships across the industries to help each other with innovation, and because the whole system needs to be optimized, not just one company. Yeah.
We will talk about that you redefine your supplier network, your customer network. You will redefine it. We will talk about that in a minute. I think it's a good time to ask what the audience actually wants to know. I think we can get easily carried away with the discussion among the people on the panel. So I give the word to the attorneys of the audience, and would like to know what is it that people would like to know. I think that's an interesting question, because we have a company that does strictly B2C, both to professional and to consumers, and we have a company that does partly B2B and B2C. So I don't have any thoughts about that. Maybe we ask the gentleman, and we ask Michael about his experience later on. You want to go first?
Yes, it's a very complex answer, because it's not so easy. As a company, you can always say, I just put the product on the market and the consumer buys it because it's good, it works, and it's healthy, or it's eco-friendly, but that's not the way it works. In all ecological branding, you can say you need a long time of more or less building up trustworthiness, because the consumer doesn't believe at the first sight. He really wants to be convinced, and he wants to have a good feeling, and he wants to be sure he's doing the right thing. So to give you the answer, you first have to build up a strong brand, you have to become trustworthy, and then the consumer buys, and he more or less gives us the possibility to put these products on the shelf. But of course, we have to develop them. We're the ones that produce them, and so it's a mixed answer. It's on the one side, it's the producer, but if you don't find a customer that buys it, then, like again, you won't have any kind of a business case. The strength of the consumer is there. If a consumer doesn't buy your product, then you're out of the market. Very easy. But if you put a lot of, for instance, advertisement behind it, then again, you might stay in the market because you have a lot of advertisement that you invest in there. So consumer good market is very complex. It's not so easy to give an easy answer. But I would say trustworthiness, then you convince the consumer that they do the right thing if they buy your product, and then the consumer has the choice, and then he will buy your product in comparison to the other products that he could have at the same price, but they're less eco-friendly. So he has a strong influence.
In the case of B2B, relationship, we deal mostly with architects and designers, for example. And they all love to have products that are better for health and for the environment, no doubt about this. Of course, they won't pay one more cent for it, so put it aside. The issue you have is to convince them that what you're doing is very sincere. It's not greenwashing. And I think there are so many companies that are greenwashing that it's the first challenge you have. So you have to first be very honest, very transparent. I very much believe in transparency. Disclose everything. For example, we now disclose all the formulations of all our products so they can have their own opinion about it. And very important for us was to partner with a third-party certification company, and EPEA is the choice that we made, so that we have a third-party view, independent view on what we do. And that being explained to your specifiers, the architects and designers, giving them also the visibility of what you're trying to achieve. What is your sustainable development strategy? What are your goals? Talking about 2020 goals. You want to eliminate all waste to the landfill. You want to reduce energy and water consumption. You want to have better products that are all being certified. You give them tangible numbers and tangible figures to show them that this is serious stuff. It's not like what we hear today, for example, COP21. Everybody is becoming excited about environment. And what's going to happen next year? Once COP21 is done, are we going to see so many companies still talking about it and doing something about it? Or the event of the year is done and we move on to something else? That's really the thing that we have to convince. And I think with the commitment of all the people in the company, and that's very important because it's not just the CEO speaking, it's really the 12,000 employees that are really believing in it and spreading the word and spreading their enthusiasm. And that's very convincing more than anything else.
You just mentioned one thing, the retailers say it must not cost more than the other products. And I think you've also said the pressure in the retail chain is quite high. I would like to pick up the notion of good products have to be more expensive. And maybe, Michael, we start at your side of the table or the round here. What is that? Is that a prejudice? Oh, this is blowing up my ear. Is that a prejudice? Is that true? Are good products more, do they have to be more expensive than bad products?
So first of all, when you come up with a new innovation, you're competing against highly optimized wrong systems. Yeah. So it has been optimized with weight, with costs, with production, with scale. Yeah. When you start with new things, yeah, you start with something where you just have a small number of production, you don't have a market, you don't have a real marketing system, and a lot of things which you do, which are real innovation, you cannot really promote in your own company because you're discriminating the other products as well. Yeah. So when you say, for example, we have been doing for one of the big underwear companies, the first underwear which you can have a deep black which you wear on your skin. Yeah. And now you said this underwear is designed for skin contact. What do people say? What about the other stuff? Yeah. Or we did the first TV set which is designed for indoor use. Yeah. So what about the other TV sets? Yeah. So this is the first thing. This is why we call it cradle to cradle, because then you don't need to say negative things about others. And the second problem is that the existing products fulfill standards which are expensive. So, for example, you have to fulfill an FDA standard for food contact. So when you need to come up with something new, and even the old thing is wrong, why should you apply for a new permission when you have the permission for all the old stuff? Yeah? So this makes it expensive. First, this is why it's important for Cradle to Cradle that you form communities between different companies. And that, hey, you need paint, I need detergents, you need flooring, yeah, I need toilet paper, whatever. So that you help each other to scale up production much faster, to come to bigger quantities. But overall, the products which we see and which we make are at about 20% cheaper than the ones which are on the market, because you can put the filter in your mind at the beginning in the design so that you can make far better products. To give you an example, the fabrics you're sitting on here, they need a lot of flame retardants because it's a public place. Yeah? They need a lot of terrible chemicals at the beginning because these fabrics need to work for a certain period of time, and people just use what works for that. Yeah? And so to make these fabrics, the pieces you cut off when you make such a seat here are so toxic that you need to put them into hazardous waste incineration. Yeah, but you sit on this chair and you get a little nervous sitting next to a beautiful lady, whatever. You just get nervous, and then you actually eat this chair. You eat the fabric. You pick it up. Yeah? So it needs to be designed to be edible. So one of the first products which we did was fabrics which you actually can eat, which you can cut in small pieces and put it in your muesli if you want. Yeah. So you don't need any waste management behind it. And the product per se is easier, the occupational health is easier. Yeah, it's easier to make it. You don't need landfills. You can use the materials you cut off to replace peat, Torf in German. You can replace peat by using this material. So it's about 20% cheaper. And you can make it in Switzerland because you don't need to do all the wastewater treatment thing behind it. But first, to get it established, it competes against heavily optimized wrong systems. So at the beginning, it makes it more expensive per se, but these fabrics are much cheaper to make because you don't need to do environmental costs and occupational health costs. But this is why what Monica said at the beginning, it's so key when you now have an installed waste management industry, yeah, which burns the stuff. Yeah, then you need to use these incinerators because they're there already. And so you optimize the wrong system. Every kilogram which you take out of the incinerator, you have to pay twice. Yeah, first, because you don't have the caloric capacity. And secondly, you need to do something with it. Yeah. So this is why it's critical that we see highly optimized systems competing against innovation. And this only works when you do government things like public purchasing. You need to say, hey, we will prefer cradle-to-cradle products against others. Yeah. And this is happening now in countries like the Netherlands, where it say we prefer cradle-to-cradle. But as well, when you do this internally in companies, you say whenever there is a cradle-to-cradle product which we need to purchase, then I prefer a cradle-to-cradle product. Then industry can do it on their own. But there are 280 billion euros of public purchasing power in Germany every year, 280 billion. And so it's ideal to be a change agent because of that. And this is why it's important not to build all these end-of-pipe waste management technologies, because then you need to feed these incinerators, and then you cannot change. This is really critical. But overall, we can show these fabrics are dominating the transportation sector, and they can be made in Switzerland because they know they're just a better product, and because indoor air quality in a train or in a bus or in an airplane is very critical. People understand it because they want to have healthy stuff in an airplane for that. This is why it's economically successful today. Yeah.
Still, from the end user, I think that's a right observation, but it's very systemic. It's what does it mean for the end user? I mean, if they're standing in front of the shelf, how does Frosch compare to the other products? And because we always have this notion of saying, well, there's a small part of the customers actually being willing to pay for products which are better, and they're willing to pay a little bit more. We know about the pressure on the retail chain. Is that really the case? I mean, how do your products compare price-wise to other products?
I mean, basically, there's...
and who picks them up?
Well, first of all, how do you actually have a chance of creating something like a premium price or a little bit higher price? It's brand strength or it's innovation. If it's something the consumer cannot buy in any other place, then obviously you have the possibility to create a new price. Best example is Apple. Or you have a very strong brand, also good example with Apple, that you can really more or less dictate a pricing in the market. Beyond that, the consumer, again, he compares. He compares what does he get back for his money. And he wants a clear, it has to work, and he has to like it. And that's at the end, maybe with the eco-friendliness, you have a small percentage that you can maybe have a slightly higher price. But we are in the market and we are competing with Procter & Gamble, with Henkel, with Unilever. They're very, very big companies, and they're very economically strong companies, and it's very difficult to actually have a strong price difference. Plus, the retailers, the retail chains that we sell to, they will not accept that different pricing because they fear that the consumer will not buy the product, and then he will more or less also lose lose money. So again, it's a there's a possibility if you have a strong trustworthiness and transparency in everything to also create a higher price. And the other thing is, it's innovation. And innovation is something actually that I wanted to also mention. It's something that also fits very good to Cradle, because Cradle more or less is coming from the notion of changing perspectives and really looking at things in a new way. And that's what we are also trying to do with every product that we put into the market as an innovation. It's really thinking about how can we completely start from a more or less blank piece of paper, and then finding out what kind of ingredients we need and where they come from, and maybe even find a source that has until then be treated as waste, more or less taking waste and regenerating that. And that, again, if you create a story, is important for the consumer because he wants to also have a story that he buys.
I think that's a very good point to say. You think differently about your supplier network. It's not just the product. And I think one of you shared the example of the blister packs, a completely different industry. Yeah. I think you said we use that as a resource. I think that's interesting to understand. How do you redefine actually what you view as your business and your relevant markets?
Very often, the innovation that we are talking about, if you think differently, doesn't cost more. Very often, it costs less, as Michael said. But you have to change the way of seeing things. You have to see scrap, for example, as a nutrient. Let me give you two examples. In Brazil, the cost of PVC, virgin PVC, is quite high. So we've been looking for buying scrap PVC, and we found a company that is making pharmaceutical blisters, and at the end of their production line, they had scrap. This scrap used to go to landfill. What a waste. Now, they are very happy. We go there and take their scrap for close to nothing. We crush it down, and it becomes our nutrient to make PVC flooring. So actually, thinking differently and expanding your view to other industries, other companies, is opening so many opportunities to do things differently in a better way and cheaper way. Another example, at Deso, a carpet producer, they found that the water treatment systems generate a lot of carbonate calcium. And that's a waste for them, and they don't know what to do with it. Now, we partnered with them, we take their scrap, and that becomes a filler to make our carpet backing. So again, scrap becomes a nutrient, and that has a benefit for both companies, for the scrap producer and for us. So very often, thinking differently opens lots of opportunities that are not more expensive. Now, in some cases, it is more expensive. And again, as this in the example that was given, the main issue is the retail owners, not the end users. Sometimes the end users are prepared to pay a little bit better for a product that is providing a much better health and environment impact. But the retailers and the trade professionals don't see it this way, because they are only purchasing people. They don't see about the big picture.
And my understanding is Deso delivers carpet or flooring to offices, and they take back, so you basically rent the usability of the carpet. You don't buy the carpet, but you give back the...
Absolutely. That concept is not so much for a financial reason, because today interest rate is so low. I mean, and people who are in offices, they are professional people, they have the finance to, of course, offer and finance their floor. The concept is that you keep the ownership of the carpet, so at the end of use, then you can take it back, and this was developed a recycling manufacturing system that is recycling carpet. So if you don't lose the ownership of the carpet, you lease it. When the tenant doesn't need it anymore, you can take it back, recycle it, and make a new carpet out of it. So that's the concept behind it.
I would like to turn to our attorneys again. I would like to move on, like what are challenges, what are also positive surprises later on with the panel and also special guests we have in the audience. But do we have any questions around challenges, surprises?
So
Okay, I have to give that to the international, probably, Michael.
So definitely the people in China understand cradle to cradle much easier than the people in Europe because they're used to think in cycles for much longer. Take, for example, when you are invited for dinner in China, people expect you to stay after dinner to use it till you use the toilet because it's unfriendly to leave and to take the nutrients with you. So you're invited for dinner, not for stealing nutrients. So this is why people think about circular systems much easier than we do. You can understand it's so easy. We hate so much to be on this planet. We feel so terrible to be here. We always apologize. You can see that there is not one organic label which allows that our own feces, that our own excrements, our own nutrients can go back. Yeah, Demeter, Nature, Progrès, whatever you take, doesn't allow to take our own nutrients back. And phosphorus is far more rare than oil. We need to pick up every day 1.8 grams of phosphate to feed for our bones, our teeth. Yeah, and we think it's only organic when our phosphorus cannot go back. Just by that, we would be too many people if we don't learn to get our phosphorus back. In the whole medieval times, we only took things from the farmers, but we never gave them anything back. So this is why we need to go away and do colonialism, to steal nutrients from somebody else, yeah? Because we were too stupid to put our own nutrients back. And the Chinese and other Asian countries have this in their tradition.
But do we have specific examples of companies in Asia working on C2C?
Just from the mentality. On the other side, it is important that the sustainability discussion here, all this blame and shame and end of planet discussion generated the expertise how to make a difference. And now, from the mentality, it's easier, but you need a certain time. So it took us 40 years to come basically to understand for everybody that cradle to cradle makes sense for business. But it was all first about blaming and shaming and end of planet discussion. Now we have the expertise, and we don't have another 40 years in China to wait till they have the same environmental debate. And they never had this debate. They just make the same bloody mistakes which we did. But you can see companies like Good Baby, you can Google them, Good Baby, Cradle to Cradle, and you see how Good Baby, this is the world's largest maker of children's things, is now adopting Cradle to Cradle. Until 2020, all their products will be cradle to cradle. They make strollers, they make baby beds, they make car seats, Maxi Cosi, and all the stuff is all Good Baby stuff. Yeah? They make more good things for children than there are babies on this planet, far more. Yeah? They make bicycles for children, and they show. But we only can do this because we can take the blueprint, what we learned with office furniture here, that we can use the chemicals, the materials, which then can now be applied at Good Baby. But you can see as well for Taiwan, we did a master plan for how the whole island of Taiwan is changing. And the certification for cradle to cradle in Taiwan is for free. So whenever you make a product which we want to get certified, just make a little legal entity in Taiwan, because then the government pays for the cradle to cradle certification for Taiwanese companies. So it's easy to get it basically for free because the government pays for the certification. You see, this is in the mindset of the people in Asia, they're far further ahead in the tradition, but in the technical and in the mindsets, in the management, they first are at the same level what we had in Europe in the 70s, and we don't have another 40 years to wait. So we need to make a blueprint, and because this is why it's important that you do things in Asia as well with people like Michel Giannuzzi and Tarkett. You can translate it to Asia, to other places as well in the world, and this is important. So that you have this international learning process, because otherwise we will be too slow, and we'll pay too much for just repairing the damages.
I would like to introduce at that point a guest we have in the audience, Martin Sturte, the director of the McKinsey Center of Business and Environment. And I think this is a good point to introduce you, because I'm curious if you work with companies who would like to put more environmental aspects or develop a strategy on that. What are, from your point of view, the biggest challenges for companies really to take that on? I mean, we're all sitting here, we say it's a great idea to make better products, but it has been a long road for you, and it's still, I must say, it's a minority of companies actually doing it. And what are your insights? What does companies actually hinder? What are the biggest obstacles they have to overcome to really change and to really take on good products, be it C2C or something else? Do we have a mic for Mr. Moment. This gentleman there.
Thanks a lot. So that comes unexpected.
Not quite.
First of all, the one obstacle that they have, that they can't believe in it because there are so few examples. In a way, it's a drama. It's a drama how often we have to use words like Frosch and Desso. We are overusing those examples because there are so few. So let's turn it around. How important it is to have that precedence. How important it is to have the Dessos and the Froschs. Yes, it's absolutely true that everyone knows that the inherited sustainability paradigm is in fact frustrating and fatiguing. And there are many examples how that actually became also to the awareness of companies that it's a dead end. I've just been working on a very interesting and gruesome problem, plastic in the ocean. We will have 1 kilo of plastic on every 3 kilo of fish very soon, and over the next 12 years we'll be doubling our plastic output globally, particularly in those countries that don't collect it, countries that don't collect it. And one of the reasons for that, as Michael said, is that we have been optimizing it more and more. We have made plastic lighter and lighter and lighter, all with the good intention of making it more environmental. In the end, we have created something that end of life is worth so little that's not being picked up, so it's entering the ocean. So we haven't been thinking about it very systemic. I think, however, there is massive change happening under our feet. The whole story that there are so few Dessos and Frosch Marktbestände, I think there's 3 things that are actually happening right now. The one is that we are in the year 2 after Uber, and then we are in the year 1 after Janec Potočnik, and we are in the year 3 after Tesla. The Uber story is really something very important. I think the one reason why this agenda has been too slow has to do with the fact that we haven't been able to monetize it, and we need new business models. Every CEO you meet from any European company, I assure you, had a strategic discussion in the boardroom over the last 6 months where they have been questioning whether their business model is still the right one. I'm absolutely sure everyone does it, simply because you have to. And the Uber story is just so strong, like Uber or not, but the Uber story is just so strong that everyone is currently questioning the business model, and that's a huge opening for the cradle-to-cradle agenda. The second one, Janec put, there is, for years and years, we have been asking ourselves on a political level, how can we, particularly in Europe, get back our competitiveness? And all our effort is in reconstructing banks and doing that kind of stuff, but no one had a good idea to be brought to the table where competitiveness could actually come back from. And resource productivity is the only idea that I'm aware of brought to the table right now that could answer that question. And cradle to cradle is the business, the business system behind it that could make that such a resource productivity story real. And there's a very nice new kind of competition now happening. It's not a race to the bottom for once, but a race to the top as China and Europe start competing around resource productivity. That's really cool. And then the last one is, and that Matthias Hawk said that we need some new sense of ecological hedonism. So, and Tesla is probably the best way to tell that story. That it feels good to have some sort of it feels good to show off with something that's just systemically better, and sort of the Tesla is very incomplete, but it's sending signals that there is a systemically better solution than what we are hooked up to when we talk about mobility today. So I think it's those 3 things that are really that might change the course dramatically in years to come.
So you say there's reason for optimism that we will have more Dessos and frost coming up if those discussions continue.
Michel, like it or not?
Great. Thank you so much.
May I add something? May I add something? You think you only talk about products, but I'm talking about the mind behind it. And when you see that we still talk about Lüneburg wants to be climate neutral, yeah. So then you understand it needs a mind shift. Did you ever see a climate neutral tree? So with all our brain, we want to be more stupid than a tree. Yeah. And everybody says, hey, hooray! Yeah. A tree is always positive for the climate. Think about you come home and you said, oh, I'm child neutral. Yeah. What an idiot. Yeah. Would it be child neutral? But climate neutral is okay. Yeah. You only can be climate neutral when you don't exist. So from changing from minimizing your footprint, yeah, which is still, people still do footprint calculation to minimize, to make a beneficial footprint, it's a complete mind shift. And when you understand that it took 150 years between the Declaration of Human Rights in German language in 1765 and the rights for women to vote, 150 years in 1919, yeah, then you understand things take time. Yeah, so I'm amazed. I didn't expect that Cradle to Cradle would happen during my lifetime at all. Yeah, because this takes time. It's a shift of the mindset behind. And now we see more and more people. There are already about 4,500 products on the market as Cradle to Cradle. And this is amazing. And when you see that you can change so many things so fast, then it's more that we need to form communities to support each other better. Yeah, and we do. But the thinking is still at the very beginning. People talk about digitalization, digital age. Yeah, but so digitalisierung. But it's a dünitalisierung. There is no digitalization. So people take 3D printers and they are proud of them and they use the most toxic materials you can imagine. Yeah. The material base of our existence is so primitive. When you take just a little coupon when you buy something, a thermal paper, yeah, a parking ticket, and you get dozens of chemicals in your blood immediately just by touching this, then you understand the material base is not there and the thinking is not there. And I'm amazed. Look, I was at BMW and they showed me the new factory of the future. And they buy 200 robots for the future. How sick? Yeah. Why should you buy a robot? Because then you have to pay for maintaining the robot. You have to pay for all the costs related to the robot. But even the BMW people didn't think about to buy 100 million welding points. Yeah. 100 Millionen Schweißpunkte. Because you don't need a robot, you need the service of a robot. Yeah. And if the thinking is not there, then we need to be far more patient and say, hey, we're amazingly fast compared. And when you see that's the second conference and we have more than 600 people showing up, yeah, from all different places, my God, then you can be a little more humble and say, wait a minute, things take time. Yeah. Yeah. On the other side, we have this brochure here, yeah, the catalog, the program today. This is printed by Ernst Gugler, and we will see him today somewhere. Is he here, Ernst? Yeah, so he was the one who just said, I understand this. Paper is a biological material, and it needs to be made for the biosphere. Yeah. Now, if you print an IKEA catalog in Europe, IKEA catalog, it has about 50 dangerous chemicals which don't allow composting. Yeah? If you want to use a compost in agriculture. But it's the same thing what we did since we invented printing, Gutenberg, in the 15th century. Yeah? We just used what worked. A little cobalt, a little cadmium, a little lead, a little mercury, whatever was there, it was just colorful. Naively, we took what we got from nature. Yeah? And today, we have about 50 dangerous chemicals in it when we print a catalog here. Yeah? Now it's lucrative, profitable to switch to print this catalog in China. Yeah? You fly it in the next day into Frankfurt. Yeah? This catalog, because we did some occupational health, some legislation like minimizing things, reducing, yeah, has about 90 dangerous chemicals. So we reduced about 40 difficult, dangerous chemicals. But the IKEA catalog printed in China is only half price. One is because of environmental reasons, but as well because of cheaper labor costs and things like that. Yeah. Now, but where is the difference? Whether you get shot 50 times or 90 times. Yeah. Yeah. So there is no difference in quality. We reduced a little bit, but it's still deadly. Yeah. So we invested a lot of money without any benefit for the environment. Same with solar techniques, for example. If we now, we are now losing the printing industry in Switzerland. In the last 3 years, we lost nearly half of the whole printing companies. Yeah. And it's a massive competition because people try to print cheaper and cheaper. And now the standard print stuff is printed in China and they fly it in. What do we do here? We make recycling with the 90 dangerous chemicals. And when you eat now a pizza, yeah, you eat about 1/3 of a business card just of the printing chemicals, which migrate from, because of circular economy, that migrates now from the pizza, yeah, from the printing chemicals, because we use the printing chemicals as fillers in the cardboards. Yeah. So now we eat basically the pizza cardboard, yeah, with our pizza. And then we have to pay for our health. Yeah. So we are stuck in the middle. This is why Ernst Kugler is so important. Yeah. He said, I get your point. I want to make catalogs which are designed for Pegida, yeah, or the Talibans, yeah, because when you say they are now getting more and more radical, yeah, and they talk about Lügenpresse, yeah. So the next thing is to burn magazines and newspapers, yeah, and now they can burn them safely because of Ernst Kugler, yeah, yeah, yeah. So. And so, if just the companies here in this room would decide from now on, we only print like Googler, and he can do licenses to all these other companies. So you don't need to ship it from Austria. You can have German printing companies, French printing companies. Then we would change the whole system, and it would be economically reasonable. Because 5 years ago, after the financial crisis, people had to pay up to 200 euros to get rid of used paper because nobody needed it. But then you can always make little pellets out of the paper and you can burn it. And it's always 80 euros of caloric value because it's 16 megajoules in it. So if we just decide here today that we want to have paper being printed as a biological nutrient material, we would change the system, just we here. So we shouldn't leave it to the terrorists to make changes. It's up to us. Yeah? We can make, if we decide to make things differently, it's up to you to make a decision. And if you do so, you can take 2 or 3 things like that, you would make a difference. Just the printing catalogs of Tarkett, yeah, are enough to make Googler 3 times bigger than they are today. Yeah? So it's so easy if you want to make a change in it. Yeah, it's the same with all the other stuff. But if we are stuck in the middle, we do high-tech waste management for the Chinese catalog, and then we are complaining that things are too expensive. Or for the technical cycle, if we don't make solar systems as services, yeah, 20 years of harvesting photons, yeah, we just lose our solar industry, yeah, and we are already doing so. And then we lose our solar industry and we do high-tech recycling for Chinese solar panels. And we say, oh, it's so expensive to make stuff in Europe. Yeah. So we will just become a museum for India and China because we invested a lot, but the way to hell is always paved with good intentions. So we really need to do things now differently. And we have the prototypes in place. And if you would do this for the paper industry, this is one of the most significant industries globally. You make a difference just here. It's up to you just to say from tomorrow we will only take printed materials, yeah, wherever you do, which are compostable, which you can burn in your fireplace safely. Yeah, right now, the ash is so toxic when you burn things in your fireplace that you cannot use it in agriculture. So the prototype is here, the pioneering is here. You can hold it in your hand. Just do it. Change it. Yeah.
I hate to curfew you on that, but I know there are plenty of people who want to go to lunch pretty soon. The core question of practical philosophy is what is the right thing to do? Not how to do things right, what is the right thing to do? And it feels like we have forgotten that, companies have forgotten that, individuals have forgotten that. Actually, it's quite simple if you think it through. I would like to give a last chance to the attorneys, and then I would like to end with a positive outlook on what were the positive surprises you encountered in doing what you do following C2C. Do we have some burning or a final burning question from the audience?
Well, if maybe I can give you the example of what we did for eliminating the phthalate from the plasticizers we used. When we worked very advanced R&D with BASF, I mean, very clearly I told BASF, I could have secured an exclusivity agreement and say, okay, this plasticizer that you're going to make for us, because we co-developed it together somehow, you should give me the exclusivity for it for some time. Actually, I didn't want to do it. It's just the opposite. I said, well, I'm glad that you developed something which is better for the environment, which is better for the people. And please go sell it to our competitors as well, because I think that's the right thing to do. So it's not really open source per se, but it's really trying to enlarge the potential benefits of what you're doing to even your competitors sometimes.
Basically, it's always important to talk about the open innovation and open sourcing, because obviously there's a lot of development and a lot of research that smaller companies are not able to finance, and they should of course participate in. And that's basically also one of our basic approaches, is to always, what we do within these cradle-to-cradle projects, we open to any other company that is interested.
Let's start with you. What were the most positive experiences you made? I mean, we've talked about obstacles. What does keep people from doing the things they knew would be right to do? What were positive experiences and surprises working with C2C?
I would like to just step back from the C2C licensing or this really strict ideology.
Let's take the approach without a label.
The idea of this working together in circular economy ways. It was the openness. It was the openness that companies actually developed. Maybe it was because the perception and also the willingness changed within the last years. We are working together with much bigger companies than ours. With Tarkett, we will start a much closer relationship in short time. We are working with Clariant, with Alpla, which is the biggest bottle producer in the world. And it was, in the beginning, not easy, but, because they, of course, have their very closed mindset. And to open up, it was not so easy, but actually they are now very, very, very intrigued. They really are happy with the idea of opening up and sharing experience and technologies. Of course, not all secret technologies, but at least working together a little bit more intensely.
Great. In your case, you mentioned something about motivation of your employees. Maybe you want to share that.
One of the major wastes, I think, in our companies nowadays, do you guess what it is? It's lack of motivation. How many large companies have a difficulty motivating their employees, giving them some sense of purpose, and having them enjoy what they do? That's the biggest waste we have in our companies worldwide. Now, every other year at Tarkett, we make a worldwide employee survey just to see. We ask 77 questions, very broad questions, and that's done on a global basis. So whether you are a factory worker in Brazil or in Russia, you have access to this survey. We have an answer rate of 82%, the last survey we done last year. And guess what? What's my biggest satisfaction, which was completely unforeseen, is that the question that ranked the highest amongst the 10,000 people that answered this survey was, do you think that Tarkett is doing the right thing in terms of sustainable development and environmental strategy? We got an 84% positive answers on this question. That was the highest score we got of all questions. This is tremendously impactful. It's addressing the biggest waste of all companies, which is motivation of employees. Michael spoke just a few minutes ago about dignity. Our employees have found dignity in doing what they do. That has no value for me.
That's great. That's great. Michael said, I'm so focused on products. The reason is very simple. My own company, which is a charity, takes products from producing companies and retailers and distributes them to the social sector. So I would like to end with, I have to use the opportunity. Those of you producing stuff, if you have anything left, if you would like to donate rather than to throw it away, come and talk to me. This is also a new way of using things. I would love just to distribute cradle-to-cradle products and just to distribute good products. That's not the case so far. We distribute whatever is marketable and is used in the social sector. So that's why I'm so focused on tangible things. I can get a pallet of it and put stuff on a truck and send it out to those who need it. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much to the audience. Wish you all a good lunch, and thank you very much for being here this morning.